friends! Welcome back to my channel. I've been navigating a lot of changes over the last while, and while the majority of those changes have been overwhelmingly positive, like I recently completed an 8-month practicum placement that I've been completing since January, I've been struggling a lot with motivation. So in today's video, I'm going to have a casual sit down where I take you through some of the steps that I took to process and reflect on where this is all coming from, what's really going on, and what I'm planning on doing about it. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then please grab yourself a cozy beverage. I've got my tea right here, and I'm currently drinking a ginger and peach tea. Grab yourself a notebook, a planner, some kind of cozy activity while we hang out and chat. Before I get into it, I wanted to say a really big thank you for not only the positive comments for my last video, which was my Hobonichi unboxing, where I compared the items that I purchased with the Pantone postcards. I had so much fun doing it, and I was really happy to see that some of you enjoyed that. I also posted in my community page a poll on what kind of content you would like to see from me, and I wanted to thank you as well for voting in the poll if you did, and also for the feedback that I received. Some of the feedback was that you preferred these planner chats where I do flip throughs and different thoughts, and so that is what we are going to do today. A classic planner chat. I know these tend to be on the longer side, so let me know what you think about the length. Some of you mentioned that you like to have chatty videos like this playing in the background while you're doing something else, and I love that. I do the same thing. So that's what we are going to do today. I'll try to be as descriptive as possible on what I'm showing so that even if you're not watching the video, hopefully you can still follow along with what I'm talking about. And because I am filming this at night, which might be a recurring theme for the next little while as we head into winter, it might be a little bit hard to see, but I will do my best to talk you through what we're looking at. The last update that I wanted to touch on was I wanted to give a big thank you to my friend Wendi Sue at Fountain Pen News. She mailed me some, I think these are called brass shims recently, because I did this experiment a few months ago where I inked almost all of the pens in my collection with Konpeki, which is a Pilot Shizuku ink. First, I did a dip test of all of my pens, and then I also realized that if you ink all the pens, they tend to come out darker. And I still consider myself quite a novice to fountain pens, so I'm sure this is common knowledge, but I personally found this really eye-opening and insightful. So I learned a lot about my different pens and how they handle at least Konpeki. I don't know how they necessarily handle all of my different inks, but it was really eye-opening to see what was going on over here. And what became a bit of an obsession for me was the fact that my Pilot Vanishing Point, which is this one, which has historically been my whole identity. This has been my favorite pen. I love it because it is a click pen. I fell in love with how smooth it wrote when I first got it, and ironically, the very first ink sample that I bought for this pen was Konpeki, because I had read that it was such a beloved ink and I wanted to start off with an ink that had a really high rating. And I remember not really liking the ink, and I remember thinking it was a little bit too light. And so I ended up experimenting with different types of blue ink, and I landed on Asagao by Pilot Shizuku as my, favorite blue ink. I found it fascinating to try Konpeki again in these different pens. For example, putting it in my Pilot Vanishing Point with a medium nib shows how gorgeous this ink can be with the shading. I also really loved how it looked in my Lamy Safari and my Sailor Pro gears. So what I did over in the bottom corner here is I actually, with my inked pens, because I realized how different these looked when you dip a pen versus when you properly ink them, I started comparing how they all wrote, and I was struck by how light the Pilot Vanishing Point finally wrote with this ink. I know it has the capacity to be beautiful and saturated, but for some reason I've just been struggling to get that with my Vanishing Point. So Wendi Sue very patiently listened to all of my complaints. I tried all of these different things, like I tried cleaning it out, I tried using an ultrasonic cleaner. I read somewhere that if you grab an old DVD and you rip out the security tag, you can floss your tines with that if you don't have brass shims. That did improve the flow of the pen, so I think my pen was also just in need of a really deep clean. I couldn't seem to get it to write in the way that I wanted it to write, and seeing how other pens wrote with the exact same ink ignited this obsession to understand, is it even possible for the Vanishing Point Fine to write like this? I guess I was wondering if it was a limitation of the pen or not. So anyway, Wendi Sue very kindly sent me 2 types of brass shims. One was 0.02. Have them here, different thicknesses, and she recommended that I cut them in this rounded rectangle shape, and I essentially flossed a few times. I left them in between the tines. I'll show you really quickly. So I would floss it like this. I don't know if you can see it. I would kind of leave it like this for a little while. I would floss it a few times, and then she also showed me if I move this and pull at the tines ever so gently on both ends, that could also help with improving the ink flow. So I did that quite a few times. I wasn't sure if I was making much of a difference, but I think I had a bit of a breakthrough this morning. And you can see here where I've written quite a few things every time I tried a different adjustment, and with not too much pressure, it looks, I don't know if you can tell because it is nighttime, but it is coming out a lot darker compared to what it was like before. So I would say it's still not writing, as dark as some of these other pens, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I will say it is so much better. And this is the first time that I have ever tinkered with any of my fountain pens. And yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Wendi Sue for not only sending me these brass shims to play with, but also recording little demonstration videos for me when I was feeling too intimidated to try this out on my own. Feeling grateful because I love this pen so much, but it was almost like desaturating all of those inks. You can see it here as well. This was my Pilot Vanishing Point Peter Moss Ferris wheel press, and at first I thought that I had imagined how dark this Peter Moss ink could be, because when I got this ink I first inked it in my Kaweco Sport and loved it, and I remember inking it in my Pilot Vanishing Point and thinking it's quite a dull ink and I don't really like it, compared to the exact same ink that is currently inked in my Sailor Pro Gear Slim in a fine, and you can see, or at least you could if it were lighter, this is a lot darker and it's the same ink. So again, I'm not sure if that is a limitation of the Pilot Vanishing Point, which would be sad because I do love this pen so much for its functionality, and because I know the medium has the capacity to show a really beautiful version of this ink, I'm hoping with a little more tinkering I won't ruin it and I can get it closer to something darker. Even the Pilot Decimo, which is an extra fine, shows up so much darker. I have been rambling for long enough. Let's get into the planner chat of this video. Whenever I try to do some reflection, it is often very messy like this. But I sort of have some go-to prompts that I use at this point. Of course, it changes a little bit depending on the situation and what I'm trying to understand. So I used a very similar approach a few videos ago for processing the Hobonichi opening night online store situation that left me feeling not so great. Whereas in this situation, it's less of an isolated case and it's more of an overall feeling and overall set of behaviors that I've observed in myself for the last little while. So when I want to take a bit more of a longer term or like a bigger picture viewpoint, I start similarly to the last video. I ask myself what happened, but it's not necessarily like a play-by-play because it's a little more general. So some of the notes I put here were back in August, I completed my practicum placement and my program. I said I've been waiting for that day to come, and I've been thinking about that day for a long time. I was excited to pick up hobbies again. I was excited to dedicate more time into my new career, my side hustles, my hobbies, and I was also feeling paralyzed, struggling to stay motivated, and just complete really simple tasks. So that's the initial things that I wrote about when I prompted myself to say like what happened or what's going on that's making me even do this exercise in the first place. Now, when I continue to analyze this is where I reach for my health and wellness planner or tracker, which I have housed in my Hobonichi Weeks Love It Panda, which I have been extremely consistent with. I haven't missed a single day since I started this. Actually, back in I started this back in November. I've completed every single week, and I do this because it is so crucial to me to refer to when I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So we talked about what happened, and then that's when I start to say, well, what are some of the things that I'm saying to myself? What are some of my thoughts? What are some of the things that I'm feeling? And what are some of the things that I'm doing? So some of the thoughts that came to mind when I asked myself this were, I was saying things like, I could do anything right now, and that is scary. I should be more productive. I should be doing more than I am. I even asked, like, what exactly am I doing with my life? So there's some existential things going on here. There's a lot of self-criticism that's coming out here, and fear of the fact that I have wide open path for me and I don't have this structure or the familiarity of school to anchor myself to. When I ask myself, how have I been feeling? Well, I said back in August. So let's go to August. And this is the last week of my practicum placement. So it's been about a month since I finished everything. And you can see some of the feelings that I have here are, and I've written some of them out here, but I have like shocked, pressured, some negative things. I've got angry, unmotivated, unfocused, fearful, bad, worried, annoyed, frustrated, pressured, hopeful, unfocused. So disappointed, panicked, joyful. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I'll usually flip through this and make a note of what's standing out for me in terms of the things that I'm feeling. And I do pay a little more attention to the negative feelings, partially because I tend to be biased towards recording those negative feelings, which I would like to change. But I think when I do take the time to record a feeling, it's usually when I'm not feeling so great and I'm searching for the vocabulary to reflect on how I'm feeling. So often when I flip through this, I do notice that these tend to be a little bit more negative, and I don't necessarily advocate for that. I think it's good to have a balance, but that just seems to be where I gravitate towards when I'm trying to reflect. And especially in a situation where I'm not feeling great and I want to uncover what's going on, I find that the negative feelings are the ones that give me a little more to work with. In terms of some of those behaviors, if you've been watching my channel for a while now, these are not going to be new. I clearly have a pattern on the behaviors that come out when I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm not feeling so great, but here they are all the same. So we've got avoidant, so that goes hand in hand with procrastination, such as cleaning out almost all of my fountain pens and inking them all up with the exact same ink and writing all of them dry. Also avoiding text messages, so not being as prompt at answering them. Also withdrawing from friends and family, and struggling to make plans or canceling plans. Basically just withdrawing and not really engaging with my support network. So when I start to do these things, I know that it is a bit of a defense mechanism. It's my way of coping with things, and it's not necessarily a healthy way of coping with things, but it is kind of that comfort state that I retreat to when I start to feel unmotivated or unfocused or anxious. So then I wanted to take a second look at what exactly is going on. I kind of know what happened and what have I noticed, but I wanted to take it a bit of a step further and think about what has been going on in my life since that period that I wasn't feeling great. So what's been going on since the end of August? A few stressful events occurred. They're a little too personal for me to talk about on YouTube, but it's a mixture of health and work and social related events, so it's kind of a mixed bag of a lot of different things. I also had a lot of catching up to do on things that I had been putting off or procrastinating on. So I had a couple of doctor appointments. I also had to go to the dentist, and those were the days where I would find it would be disruptive. If I had a dentist appointment in the middle of the day, it would interrupt my productivity for the rest of the day, and I would have trouble focusing and getting back on track. Whereas I know there's another version of me who can get back from something like a dentist appointment and just go straight back into work. I also had to quickly set up my new small business. Also, my skin has just been going crazy. And when it gets like this, it impacts my sleep, it impacts my confidence. So I do have a dermatologist appointment coming up, but it's not until December. So it's been a lot of self-experimentation, and I've been using my health journal to note different creams that I've been trying, how my skin's been doing on a daily basis. I've been noting when it starts to get better, and I've been noting down flare-ups. So yeah, my sleep's been irregular. Also in terms of external events, Hobonichi Day, I had quite a strong response to the whole thing, and while I'm fine now and I processed it, it was a pretty strong response, and I wonder if my response would have been that pronounced if I had been in a different headspace. I've also recognized that I have an extreme lack of structure and external accountability. So September for the last few years has been like a return to school, not only for myself, but also for my sister's kids. And I do, where possible, try to help out with her kids. Also, work tends to get busy in the fall because budgets are getting to a point where they're getting used up, and in the consulting work that I do, that tends to mean summer tends to be a slow period, and then the fall tends to be when work picks up. Call it back to school, but it's kind of back to school, back to work. So I had no return to school, which is technically a great thing, but it was also like a loss of structure and schedule. And then I also had some potential work contracts that fell through at the last minute, so I had a little bit more time on my hands than I was anticipating. When I look at all of these events happening in the span of a month, thinking I was going to have some structure and schedule, but not really, having this Hobonichi Day set me off, even though in the grand scheme of things it maybe wasn't that big of a deal, but they're an integral part of my overall health and wellness. I must have attached a lot of emotion to that. On top of that, I'm just not feeling very comfortable in my own skin, literally. I'm not sleeping well, and there's just a lot of personal and health things going on in the background at the same time that I've been managing in addition to all of this. I also want to acknowledge that I recognize that I have a lot of great things going on, and I do have a lot of things to be grateful for. And this isn't meant to be a video of me just focus on the negative. I am focusing on it for this analysis because I'm trying to understand what is driving the lack of motivation and anxiety. After having gone through all of that, some of the questions I then asked myself: when was the last time that I felt this way? Because I already said that this is a bit of a pattern for me, and I think it is helpful to think about a different time in your life where you may have felt similarly, and then subsequently how you got through it. Because I know that I've felt this way before, and I also know that I have worked through it. So it's almost like a way to give myself confidence that I know that whatever it is I'm going through, I will be able to overcome it. So the last time I felt this way was when I switched from my full-time permanent employment to freelance. And I remember that I had been carefully working towards making this decision and this switch because I had wanted to go back to school, and I thought that switching to research consulting and being able to have a little more control over the projects that I took and potentially have busier periods or maybe less busy work periods if school got really busy. So it was a decision that I carefully made and thought a lot about, and I had a lot of good reason for doing it. But when the time came and I stepped away from that full-time role for a while before school really picked up, I felt really lost. And I didn't really have any structure. I also lost a network of my colleagues. Even though I kept in touch with a lot of them, it's not the same thing logging in to work every day and having this whole like built-in community to connect with. And so it was really difficult for me at the time. And I can see a lot of parallels to how I felt then versus how I feel now. I've made a lot of really great connections through my school program, and I have stayed in touch with a lot of my peers, but it's not the same thing. Being in courses together, sharing experiences, and supporting each other through coursework and practicum, like a lot of that is not the same. So when I ask what helped me back then, so what helped me in the past or how did I overcome it? Well, I remember I started to take on contracts. So this period where I felt really lost and really like untethered. Editing note, I can't believe I forgot to mention that something else that really helped me out was I finally started a gratitude log, which was something that I had heard would be really helpful, and I never got around to doing it, but I did try it out, and that really made a difference. It took a while for it to help, but I did notice a shift in my bias towards focusing on negative things. I used my traveler's notebook monthly insert to do that, and I have since shifted that practice into my Hobonichi 5-year Techo. Very anxious. As soon as I started to get some contracts, that gave me a lot of structure because I had deadlines for clients and I had people to communicate with. Even if they weren't exactly colleagues, they were kind of like colleagues, or they were peers that I could just have some social connection with. I also really got back into making my daily to-do lists, and that's why I'm so adamant about doing daily to-do lists as opposed to like a weekly to-do list, just because it resets my brain every day where I can write down all of the things that I need to do, and that adds some accountability, and it also gives me a little bit of a boost. It gives me something to do, something to cross off, something to kind of look forward to, and it allows me to take whatever's in my brain and, get it out on paper. So I started to lean heavily into this daily to-do list, and I realized that this is something that I need to integrate into my life. And when things start to go crazy, usually that another way that I can see it is when I stop doing those to-do lists and I'm just being very reactive to my day. I also reached out to my friends and my support community. So I talked through how I was feeling. I went to therapy, And that really helped to validate my experience. And it also helped me remember that this experience that I'm going through is temporary. And even though it can be really difficult to adjust from having the freedom to completely structure my day, but not knowing how to start and feeling really paralyzed and overwhelmed with that freedom. And in therapy, this was also an opportunity to explore my perceived need to be busy. It's a little bit deeper than I'm really going to get into in this video, but my point is there are things that you can do that can immediately help you and address some of those more immediate things that you're feeling. And then there's also an opportunity, if you're open to it and you find a safe space to do it, to explore what could be really going on to drive you to have those reactions to the situation. Like, what is it about suddenly not being so busy that I barely have time to eat my lunch? Why do I feel like I thrive in situations like that where I'm so busy versus a situation where I have the structure and the freedom, but it also means that I go through periods where I don't have a lot of deadlines. Similarly, another thing to address in therapy is tying my self-worth to things like status, income, job title, busyness, that kind of thing. And then another thing that really helped me, and I've also talked about this in the past on my channel, is I deleted Instagram. I still have no desire to go back on Instagram. For the sake of my business, it is something that I'm considering. But for now, having a personal Instagram was not healthy for me. When I talked about being avoidant and procrastinating, one of the things that I was doing a lot of was I was scrolling endlessly on Instagram. This behavior became problematic for me, and what started as a quick distraction, a quick way to stay connected with friends, turned into hours of scrolling and not doing anything productive myself, and also feeling disconnected. Deleting Instagram was a really good move for me, but I know that it is not possible for everyone, especially if you have a business, or especially if you're able to have a healthy relationship with social media. So in terms of next steps, I kind of look at what's going on. I look at what I've done in the past to help me move forward. And then I think about what I want to do with this knowledge. So what do I want to take from what I've done in the past? And how do I want to apply that to what's going on now in terms of how I want to get through this? This is a little bit messy. By no means is this a final, this is exactly what I'm going to do. But early thoughts, and I always like to remind myself to practice acceptance and self-compassion without judgment, because I'm very good at judging myself. I wrote here, it can be uncomfortable, and staying organized in tasks and activities is likely a characteristic of inattention, which is one of the primary characteristics of ADHD. I also wrote, I have the tools and knowledge and capability to move forward. So I know from my own past that I have been able to get out of this rut and eventually move past this lull that I'm in. And I put here, pick one thing. So basically prioritize all the things that are swirling in my head. So I mentioned that I have a lot of things that I could do, and in a way that's part of the problem, is I get really overwhelmed with all the different paths that I could take, and I'm overstimulated with opportunity, and I realize that that is a really privileged position to be in, but it is also one that I struggle with. I've done this a lot on my channel a lot. Basically, I list out all the things that I think I want to do, and then I rank them, prioritize them, and eventually work to limit my focus. And then whatever I do decide to focus on and prioritize, break those down into what needs to be done. This all sounds really obvious, but it's just a really good reminder to myself that this is something that I know is going to help me, and it's a reminder that this is a step that I haven't quite taken yet, because I've been chipping away at everything that I want to do because I want everything to be successful, and in doing that I haven't really made a lot of progress in anything. So I've been doing a little bit of reading on ADHD symptoms and how that impacts small business owners. And I came across this article that looked at how entrepreneurs with ADHD symptoms, why some of them are successful in their ventures and why some of them are not. I'm still processing and absorbing this article, but it was so interesting. I will link it in the comments section if you're interested in checking it out. A few things that I found really interesting was that entrepreneurial passion can be described in 3 different ways. There's developing passion, where you're really passionate about growing your business, expanding your sales, looking for investors. There's a founding passion, which is really focused on assembling financial, human, and social resources to ensure that this business that you're doing is going to be successful. And then there's a passion for inventing, which is like coming up with new ideas and products and services and constantly looking out in the market for new opportunities and coming up with new plans or new products to test. And I will say that I love this inventing stage. I have started a few small businesses in the past. I had a baking business, and I also had a candle business and a stationery business. So I really love this inventing. And what this article really highlighted for me was the idea that, number one, entrepreneurs that only have a passion for one of these things isn't necessarily going to have that same level of entrepreneurial performance. At the same time, if you have an equal passion for all of these things, that's also not sufficient for an ideal entrepreneurial performance. And then the other thing that really stood out for me was that in an ideal situation, you have a strong passion for developing, because that really stimulates that ability to focus. And we know that lacking that ability to focus is one of the ADHD symptoms, and one that I struggle with. And then having a passion for founding can encourage like perseverance. So again, someone with ADHD may struggle to stick with things when they get difficult, and struggle with that lack of focus, and maybe not persevere through difficult things, which is really important for someone who is trying to run their business. Creativity and having a passion for inventing, that's a little easier, because in a way, creativity is like the one thing that we don't really lack. And so one of the propositions is that if you are someone with ADHD symptoms and you have a high level of developing and a high level of founding, that can be an ideal combination for a successful entrepreneurial performance. And that's because those 2 things are likely to help you stay focused and persevere and weather challenges. Whereas just relying on having a passion for inventing, coming up with new ideas, can lead to overstimulation and a risk of not engaging in the other tasks that are important to keeping a business running. So when it comes to my own situation, I did do a sticky note exercise that I'm going to keep private because of the contents of it, but I did take a sticky note and I put down everything that I have on my mind of things to do. And there's the exciting tasks like dreaming up new ideas or different ways to grow my business. And then there are some of those more like admin tasks that are the more developing or founding tasks that I don't find particularly interesting, but are necessary for me to keep my business running. So those are some of the things that I thought about when I did this prioritization exercise. I looked at what tasks were way too big and what needed to be thought a bit more about before I made any kind of commitment to doing them. I also considered what task had a due date or what made sense to do first before another. So for example, ensuring that my core offering is properly developed is more important than putting too much energy into or coming up with a new product or service idea. So yeah, prioritize by due date. I also had to think about scoping some of the larger tasks, because part of the reason why I was having trouble getting started was because it just felt like too big. And I also wrote, don't forget to prioritize self-care. A lot of the tasks that I put were very business oriented, and there wasn't a lot of make sure you make time for hobbies or make sure that you call friends. And that's really where something like my health and wellness tracker comes in, because it's tied very heavily to my self-care plan, which does emphasize creating space for small things that enhance my overall health and well-being. So it's more about staying connected to my friends and family, making sure I get exercise, and regularly journaling and reflecting and staying aware of how I'm doing overall and staying in tune with my feelings. So this is a really important part of my health and wellness, and so is prioritizing seeing friends. What I've been doing since taking a step back is making more plans. I also put here refine and be realistic about what's possible. Check-ins to adjust workload. So once I decide on what to do, just staying on top of it and making adjustments as necessary. I put set deadlines with an external source. So I mentioned in the past what helped was getting a contract and having external deadlines. So if I don't have a work contract and I don't have those external deadlines, then maybe there's another way that I can set some external deadlines. That could be in the form of an accountability partner, maybe joining a support group, or maybe joining some kind of accountability group. And I also put another reminder, don't forget to stay connected to my support network, because what really helped me before was opening up to my friends and family, seeking help from a therapist. They helped me stay grounded, and I was also able to explore some of these deeper things that are driving some of this anxiety that I'm feeling around this need to be busy and how I'm tying my self-worth to the work that I put out or the income that I bring in. So that's where I left things off. Doing this exercise helped me reset myself and take what was swirling in my brain and start to categorize this. And after all this time, sometimes I skip this step because I've done it so many times that I think that I can do it without this intentional pause. And whenever I think I don't need to do it anymore is usually a sign that I need to just go back to basics. So what always works for me is using a notebook or using my sticky notes, getting it all out so that I can see everything, and then doing a few passes to prioritize and figure out an order for me to do things, and then leaning on my daily to-do list to set some accountability. And when this fails to really help me stay accountable, my next step is to seek some kind of external accountability. So I don't know yet what that is going to look like. I'm exploring different options for potential groups that I can join for some support and accountability. If you're interested, I can share where I'm at with another update on this channel. And if you also struggle with this type of thing and you're looking for some additional accountability, please feel free to use the comment section to share whatever you're working on, unless it's confidential, and we can keep each other accountable in the comment section. So that is everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope you enjoyed the cozy nighttime vibes, and if you have any questions about what I went over today or the article that I very quickly went through, let me know. I'm interested in reading more about ADHD and small business owners or entrepreneurship, so I have a few other articles that I want to read, and I'm happy to share any findings that I think are interesting in future videos. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here if you're still here, and I look forward to conversing with you in the comments down below. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye!